What's going on, guys? In this video we're going to talk about Bitcoin, something very exciting. If you can see beside me, Bitcoin supply on exchanges at an 8-year low, skipping last cycle in terms of supply. We looked at this yesterday. Bitcoin on exchanges is at lows from the beginning of the cycle with 3 million Bitcoin on exchanges. We're also going to talk about the spot Bitcoin ETFs, what's been going on. Obviously we've been seeing some outflows. To what extent though? And when should things flip to inflows there? Then we'll touch on Bitcoin's chart. I'll talk about some important levels. Bitcoin's having a bit of a red day. The Bitcoin miners are selling off to end the week. We do have one stock that's absolutely rallying. Chargepoint. I'm going to give you my thoughts on it. It is having a massive run today. It's been running like crazy. There's an important trend line that it looks like it's finally breaking over, but am I bullish or am I bearish? Now, BRN research analysts say Bitcoin's underlying structure has improved steadily despite muted spot momentum. And Timothy Miser, I like his first name, BRN's head of research, noted that exchange balances have fallen to roughly 1.8 million Bitcoin, the lowest level since 2017. Now, he says this according to crypto, quant, and Glassnode. What we're seeing is that Bitcoin on exchange is sitting at 2 million. Other sites say it's somewhere around 2.7 million. So honestly, I don't know where he's getting the 1.7 million from. Looking at coinglass here, Bitcoin exchange balance is sitting at 2.09 million Bitcoin. He also added that accumulation is persistent, supply is thinning on exchanges, while price stabilizes above the true market mean. Now, wherever Bitcoin is on exchanges, because different sites show different numbers, one thing's for certain, it is continuing to hit new lows. Whether people say it's an 8-year low, a 5-year low, Bitcoin balances on exchange is definitely hitting lows. We've also had liquidations going down, 312 million in total liquidations over the past 24 hours, lower than the multi-billion-dollar spikes we've seen earlier the week. The market manipulators are kicking out that leverage, collecting that cash before they let Bitcoin do its next move. They don't want things to rally when there's so much leverage in the game. This article also goes into other things like the Fed and a 90% chance of a rate cut. And also, the US Treasury executed a record $13 billion debt buyback this week, adding liquidity to the system. But yeah, what I'm seeing according to coinglass is Bitcoin on exchange is 2.09 million. Crypto Quant says exchange reserve is 2.768 million. Whereas going back as far as this will let me, down to 2022, we had 3.17 million Bitcoin on exchanges. So it seems like the numbers are all over the place, but one thing's for certain, Bitcoin continues to be taken off of exchanges and hitting new lows in that regard. Now, looking at what the spot Bitcoin ETFs have been doing lately, we've been seeing outflows, obviously. Another $113 million exited on Thursday, putting the fund, in terms of Blackrock, on track for a 6th week in the red, longest streak since its debut in 2024. We've seen $2.7 billion in redemptions or outflows over the past 5 weeks, which is the heaviest outflow cycle since launch. I personally think this is healthy to be seeing some outflows come in instead of seeing constant inflows. I personally think it's good to see things reset at times. And the last time we saw a good amount of outflows, we know what happened in the months following. And here's a chart that shows inflows and outflows. You'll see what we typically see is very, very steady inflows, an occasional couple weeks of outflows. This is the weekly, but in general you see week by week mostly inflows. There are like a $71 billion assets under management, and this is from being at zero in early 2024 when this all started. And one thing I speculated was we're gonna see these spot Bitcoin ETFs hit new milestones, $100 billion in assets under management, for example. But you do get these phases, which is normal. You get these run-ups, you get the pullbacks. But to think that the spot Bitcoin ETFs were a bad thing for Bitcoin, I think that is false. I think they are a good thing for Bitcoin overall. And this opens up a whole investor base that would otherwise never even touch Bitcoin, never think about buying Bitcoin on exchanges. They'd rather just buy it on the stock market. Also, of course, we have Vanguard finally allowing spot Bitcoin ETFs on their platform, which is honestly, in my opinion, a pretty big deal. Okay, now looking at Bitcoin, you'll see we talked about this yesterday, how it got rejected off this important 94 area that we mentioned, which was a previous support, flipped as resistance, flipped as support. It's much more clear on the week, like I showed you the other day. You could see this. This is a clear area, and we did get caught up at it. We did get rejected at it for now. One thing we also saw, we'll go back to the daily again, sorry I'm jumping around. We did see a breakout of this trend line, but it did get hung up here at 94,000. Now it's retesting the trend line. It did break under it, but we're getting a wick back up. If Bitcoin can stay above this trend line, that'll be a good sign. This retest could give us the bounce to test that 94,000, and hopefully this next attempt we break out and can test our moving averages. First the 50 MA at 100,000. Then the 50 MA weekly at 102,000, which in my opinion is absolutely crucial to break out of. Now, I'm not going to be a broken record this time. If you're curious about the 50 MA on the weekly and its significance, I'll link you my video at the end screen. I just don't want to be too repetitive with my videos. but the 50 MA is a very important trend line to break over. If we do find it as resistance, yeah, not good. Now, if we do break under this trend line, it'll be important to hold up our previous bouncing off points. But I'm feeling pretty optimistic about Bitcoin. We may be even starting a trend. We'll see where things go in the following days. But, you know, if we get a bounce, a continued run, we might start this nice little ascending channel. We were previously in a basically downtrend with this as the resistance. We'll have to see if we get the bounce here or if we fall back under this resistance that may flip as a support, may not. It's up to the market to decide. We can't predict. Either it's going to break under and fall, or it's going to hold it and we're going to test 94. Now, I do want to jump on Chargepoint, talk about what's going on. They did report earnings and they did see some improvement. We finally saw some revenue growth for the first time in a long time. Things have been trending better in terms of that. We did see another unprofitable quarter, which is the norm for Chargepoint. And this is why I'll cut right to the chase and say I'm not bullish on Chargepoint. On the short term, would you want to short it? Not necessarily. But is this a buy here for a long-term position? I don't think so. Chargepoint released their earnings. They beat Wall Street's revenue expectations. Sales up 6% year on year to 105 million. Their guidance is 105 million for next quarter. I don't know how that's optimistic. It's the same as the previous quarter. At least there's not a revenue decline like we typically have seen. They're a GAAP loss of $2.23 per share. Unprofitable, consistently unprofitable. They had a reverse split maybe a few months ago. I'll show you guys the chart in a second. But it is a good sign to see companies that are unprofitable growing their revenue rather than shrinking it. The thing is, when will Chargepoint ever be profitable? It seems like it just can't do so. I remember being into this stock in like 2020, hoping that they'll eventually reach profitability. We saw massive revenue growth during the time. Now, I don't remember if we did see a quarter profitability, but if we did, it didn't last, and we went back to seeing unprofitable quarters and the company burning cash, diluting shareholders. I'll be very careful with Chargepoint personally. But you can see that their revenue is, trending back up after its long decline since mid to early 2023, which is a positive, of course. And in terms of their year-on-year revenue growth, you'll see that, from this decline, it is popping. I mean, these are showing you similar things, essentially. But, here's one of my worries with Chargepoints. One, they have more debt than cash. An unprofitable company with more debt than cash is worrying. I remember back in 2020, 2021, they had a lot more cash than they did debt. They were unprofitable, but they had a good runway, a good amount of time before they would have to figure something out and either become profitable or dilute shareholders or take out high interest rate debt because the Fed was getting into a rate hiking cycle around that time. It is seeing a massive 25% pop on a positive earnings news. They did beat top and bottom line. However, unprofitable, 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 and revenue about the same as it was back in 2024, and even down from 2023. There's the reverse split, a 1-to-20 split. If they didn't do this, this stock would be like 50 cents right now. So don't let the $10 price fool you and you thought maybe you sold at $2 and you missed out on a massive run. It's likely because of this reverse split throwing the price off. This is split adjusted, obviously. Now look at this massive downtrend. Look at this interesting clear trend line. It looks like it's finally trying to break it for the first time. I would want to see confirmation, let a candle close out of it, maybe retest and bounce, break over the 200 MA on the daily, hold the 50 MA. These are completely pointing down. There's not even a curving, trying to curve up. I'll be very cautious. On the daily, it's not yet overbought. It could keep running on hype and excitement and speculation that, hey, maybe they will get to profitability again. Maybe their revenue growth, they can improve their margins. We do have news that subscription growth has grown, but what are they anticipating the next quarter? Basically the same revenue that they saw and an unprofitable quarter again. So, stocks like this that are consistently never profitable are very risky. They're either going to dilute shareholders, take out debt. If they're burning cash quarter to quarter, the valuation for the stock, the valuation the stock deserves, should be lower and lower if they're continuing to burn cash and not making money, not making a profit. This is one thing I've learned with stocks like this, with stocks like BNGO, that you think, one day they'll reach profitability, but that day seems to just never come. So there's a PSA, be careful with stocks like this. Be careful with the Bitcoin miners. They're not always profitable either. They are proxies for Bitcoin. At times that Bitcoin goes up, they can outperform. For instance, CleanSpark's up 50% from Bitcoin's bottom where it started running, while Bitcoin's about 10%. If you can get in them at the right time, you can make some good money. If you get in them at the wrong time, you can lose more money than you would if you would have just bought Bitcoin. They are derivatives to Bitcoin. They are basically like leveraged plays to Bitcoin. During good times, they can outperform. Sometimes they don't actually, but they tend to outperform during good times. During bad times, they will underperform almost every time. But long story short, maybe Chargepoint's worth keeping an eye on for a swing trade if we can get a definitive breakout of this trend line. I could see it, rallying pretty nicely, although it is a dangerous one. I remember when this stock was a multi-billion-dollar company. Now they're a $250 million company. And while a 26% run up on the day, you're like, wow, I wish I would have caught that. If you've been in this for 6 months, you're still 20% down. If you've been in this for a year, you're 60% down. If you've been in this since it spiked, after all this run as a SPAC, if you got in at the very top, you'd be down more than 98%, 98.8%. Long story short, be careful with stocks like these. These should be short-term plays based on good technicals, based on chart. I don't personally think stocks like these are a long-term hold. Get in, get your money, get out, maybe even set a stop loss so you don't end up like one of the people that are down 80%, 90%. But how are you guys feeling about Chargepoint? And I got a question for you. Should I do videos like this and have just Bitcoin, then a stock video next? Should I lump it together? It makes it kind of hard to figure out what I want to do with the thumbnail, because then it's kind of hokey pokey and all over the place talking about Chargepoint and Bitcoin. But I just wanted to bring up both and just talk about some interesting news lately. What are you guys doing with Chargepoint? Are you avoiding it? Are you considering a swing trade? Did you get in the other day and you made a nice gain? If so, congrats. But in my opinion, you have to be very careful. That doesn't mean it can't continue to run on hype and speculation. But valuation-wise, earnings-wise, I don't think that this will have a substantial continued run, a yearly run, like a multi-year run or something like that. And eventually the hype will fade when everyone realizes, wait, when are they ever going to be profitable? Let me know if I missed something regarding Chargepoint. There could always be something in the woodwork, something on the earnings call. I obviously didn't listen to the earnings call. I'm just looking at the news today. Let me know if you did listen to the earnings call and you found something very interesting that the market maybe picked up on or didn't pick up on. But anyways, thanks as always for watching, guys. I appreciate you. Have a good weekend, and I'll see you in a couple days.